gorgeous deck of your.
See, you've got a package there, right? Yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
so what you're looking at there is one of our streets in Osaka. So that was one of our locations that was on the waterfront in Vancouver. And that was we did about 4 city blocks with a sort of central area that became Edo later on in episode 8. And we built the portion of the town alongside, adjacent to the castle walls. So the castle wall system was practical, and it was over 300 feet long. And part of that, the reasoning behind that scale was that we had to, for one of the episodes, there's a huge conflict as a party of our characters are trying to leave, and they're being held up. They're being stopped at every gate. So the set got longer and longer and longer. And until we were, but it gets used quite a lot, used day and night. So there was a fair amount of night shooting actually down on this particular set. And we were right on the water. And it used to be an old cedar mill, the property. And when we first scouted it in January of 2021, it had these massive, great chunks of equipment, conveyor belts, all sorts of metal guide tracks, and completely chock-a-block with heavy machinery. And the owners of the property really removed it all for us, and we graded the property, and we put in, we leveled things out where there were huge dips and so on. And meantime, we were prefabricating as much as we could, and then started to actually put the streets together.
What are your streets? Is that gravel?
It's gravel. Well, okay, there was another large choice. What do you do in imagining that this set and all of our exterior sets virtually have to survive all year round?
Right.
Would they just like to do packed earth, like to have done just packed earth? It'd be in a sort of a complete mud bath for most of the time. So what we did was we did a mixture of gravel with earth, and this was put together by one of our suppliers. And I loved it when it first got laid. It was quite brown in texture. It was a really nice sort of warm tone that went with all the woodwork. And as the rain hit it, of course, all the soil component sank down lower and lower. So we'd rake it to try to kind of bring it back up again. It's virtually all gravel with soil mixed into it. And that was a choice for us to find the surface that was going to work best for us throughout the sets.
Yeah. But it's nice. It has kind of like a shimmer to it. I'm sure the DPs liked it because it's not like they only had minimal lighting. So I'm sure they got, reflection off of it. I'm sure that
it glistens. It glistens. And of course, once you get it nice and wet, it really glistens. And it was more often than not, we were wetting it down, even on days when there was no rain.
Right.
Just sort of, it kept the dust down. That was another factor as well. Once it dried out, it would go quite a pale color and get very dusty. So it did make sense. Our special effects guys every day would do wet downs on the set, which it sort of it enriched the color of the gravel and the soil. So it gave it a better tone.
Do you know how much like square footage, but like, I don't know, would you have like 3 or 4 football fields of like sets outdoors? Like, how big was this? It just seems endless to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at all of this.
Yeah.
It just keeps going and going. And I mean, all of this is just so gorgeous to me. It's like,
yeah, there was a lot of scenery. There was a real lot of scenery.
Oh, beautiful.
And it was great. We got very conversant with materials. One of the things that we did on virtually all of these sets is that we burnt the wood. So we buy, well, this is another story too. Also, the availability of materials was restrictive because of COVID, because this all happened right after.
And all that to go through too.
Well, the supply chain had broken down for a lot of materials. And so every morning, virtually 10 to 7 or thereabouts, I'd be sitting in the construction manager's office with the construction manager and a couple of his foremen and the construction buyer. And we'd be debating materials, like what can we get our hands on? Okay, today, there's a couple of lifts of eucalyptus plywood out there. Okay, well, I'd say, all right, well, why don't we, can we get a sheet, and then we'll get the painters to stain it, and we'll see if that's going to work, because I'd never seen eucalyptus plywood. Fine. So this process went on and on every day, and it was like watching the stock market of what was available in terms of sheet goods and board lumber. Today we have a special on this and not on that. And so yeah, it was challenging from that point of view. And I think very early on, the costs also ramped up more than we expected initially, because prices just fluctuated wildly with all of the lumber that we used and all the materials. And so that was another interesting little facet to the whole process. But yeah, there was
it's going to be expensive, and you have to do it right. But when you pile on that extra COVID asterisk, that really hits it. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And supply chain and getting it in time. I'm sure getting it in time was also a huge factor for you.
It was. I mean, it was kind of a fun process too, because it really you stretch yourself a bit, and you really look closely back again at materials and what can you use instead of the thing that you normally use.
Right.
So that was kind of an interesting process. The ships, yeah, I'm looking now at some of your photos on the screen right now. Because we built a lot of the smaller vessels. Those were all built by our props and set decorating department. There were a couple of boats that were actually, I think they were existing boats that were then clad with wood. So we realized early on that we could use a fleet of smaller boats, and we had the help of a gentleman from New England, Mr. Brooks, who was an expert on Japanese boat building. So he was incredibly helpful in that process. And then a couple of our European boats, we actually, after when COVID hit, I, along with most of my crew, were working on another Disney project called Peter Pan and Wendy. And we had started to build sets. We'd started to build a cabin, captain's interior.
That doesn't have a boat at all. No.
Yeah. And what happened was, of course, everything got shut down. This is early 2020. So we were building parts of ships at that point, and everything shut down for months. And when that show, I then rolled over and started working on another show, a Netflix project that summer. And then when Peter Pan came back again, I was too committed to the other show. So I stepped off Peter Pan, and my crew kind of went back to Peter Pan. So anyway, at the end of Peter Pan, we had access to various ship parts, and we modified, put things together. European ships, that is. Of course, we built the Japanese galley from scratch, and we used up parts of sets from Peter Pan, which was very helpful.
Oh, that's great.
And again, everything went through a sort of modification process. Nothing was exactly right, and that was very helpful for some of our below decks, like our below deck set at the outset, where you first meet all of the Dutch sailors. That was a below deck set.
I love that.
And we just filled it with that. We could cram with lots of dressing. There's supposed to be a lot of goods, a lot of booty that they'd stolen, and of course the cannons, which play later on in the training field episode. So yeah,
I think too, just the vastness that you have going on of in each set, and the Portuguese versus and then Japan, and learning too and researching all of this must have been fascinating.
It was endless. I mean, everybody involved, the set deck buyers, prop master, everybody, whatever project they were working on.